I just want to say it's great to see, and it's rather ironic for a Population Matters conference, to say it's great to see so many people in the room. And we did actually have about over 800 people registered, which shows that sort of growing interest and awareness and people's concern around the issue of burgeoning human population. Our conference last year was called More Feet, More Heat, and it was focused on the connection between climate change and population impacts. And it had a lot of people due to attend, but we were hit by the beast from the east. So it was extraordinary because I struggled to get there from Bristol on the last train, but it was fantastic to hear our keynote speaker, Professor Peter Wadhams, one of our patrons, explain why the UK in early spring was getting Siberian weather conditions dumped upon it. And climate change, as Jonathan said at the outset, has really been in the news of late. And very much, of course, that is the cause of that disruptive, unseasonal weather. And it's been in the news thanks to the excellent efforts of Extinction Rebellion and the Swedish school strike activist Greta Thunberg. But that's building on over 30 years of effort by scientists, by campaigners, by organisations to raise the alarm and the need for action, and politicians, Stanley, globally, publicly and politically. And population, I feel, is rising up the agenda too. It's as complex and intractable an issue as climate change. And it's taken 30 years since Population Matters was founded as the Optimum Population Trust to get that sort of awareness up there so that so many of you will come out on a Saturday to listen to me and others. But we haven't got 30 years to curb runaway climate change. We haven't got 30 years to curb excessive consumption. And we haven't got 30 years to stabilize and reduce our human population, because population growth is the upstream driver of all those issues, including climate change. And we heard from the International Panel on Climate Change in their latest report that we have 12 years to make the far-reaching and rapid transitions necessary to get our planet, ourselves, and our ecosystems stabilized. So, it's really great to have had such a distinguished group of speakers here today from many disciplines, many places, and it would have been a very different age range as well if Bella had been able to be with us as well. And it shows that population is due, finally, to have the proper public discourse and policy action it merits. And I really do want to take my hat off to WWF and Dr. Mark Wright for coming along to talk today, because it does really, I think it's commendable that WWF is prepared to be on a platform about human population, finally. It's really good to see. But honestly, Mark, is that a backhanded compliment? I suppose it is, sort of, isn't it? But I mean it genuinely, as Jonathan said. There is such a growing body of scientific evidence confirming the connection between human population and wild species decline. It should give all conservation organisations the courage to come out and talk and promote the positive solutions to contend with our pressure on the planet. And one of the things which has been really seminal of late is the series that WWF UK have been doing with Netflix. I'm sure many of you have seen it. It's a sort of 8-box series running up to a film next year. If you've noticed, at the beginning of every single one of those programs, this statement is said. That statement about human population having more than doubled since man first landed on the moon. And of course, the narrator is WWF's ambassador, the great Sir David Attenborough, and our patron at Population Matters, somebody, a public figure, who has consistently highlighted population. We could all want him to do more, but my God, he's done more than most. So there has been significant progress, but there are also unfortunate parallels with the climate change debate, in that for too long, mainstream environmental groups have fallen into the camp of population deniers, population skeptics. They've avoided the issue, they've ignored the facts, they've chosen to focus on the more convenient, less controversial issue of consumption. And you heard Jonathan's point on that. He and I worked together back in 2012 to try and get the NGOs to take note of the Royal Society report, People and the Planet, which had just come out, in which that august body of scientists said population and the environment should not be considered as two separate issues. we had very limited success in persuading the NGOs to move, I'm afraid. But over the intervening 7 years, there's been a gathering body of scientific evidence which affirms and adds to the Royal Society's conclusions. So let's just go into the context. This is a graph which shows the human population increase per billion over time. So it really took almost humanity's entire existence of 200,000 years since Homo sapiens came onto the earth and became the dominant hominid to reach its first billion. In 1927, it hit its second billion. In about 1960, it hit its third, and then it's gone 4, 5, 6, 7 since to currently. And if you put that, as Mark did, I think, as well, or maybe it was Phil, into your personal lifetime, my mum was born in 1927, and she's still with us. I was born in 1958, third billion. 4, 5, 6, 7 have gone through my lifetime. I'm 60. So in one human being's lifetime, the human population has more than doubled, 2.5 times increase. And you could look at it in another way. This is population sort of growing over time, and very clearly you see the rise of the Industrial Revolution and increased sanitation, healthcare, and we get that famous hockey stick curve of population growth. And you can look at that along the growth or the reduction of other things that have happened over that period of time. Now, Mark used a version of this slide earlier. It was rather more extensive. I first saw this slide at a brilliant conference that WWF and Compassion in World Farming hosted 2 years ago. It had even sort of more depressing a title than ours. It was called, what was it called, Phil? It was called Extinction and Livestock 2017. Ours is called, the last elephant in the room, human population and the sixth mass extinction. Now, if you notice, there are 6 graphs up there. The first one is the human population curve. 4 speakers at that CIWF and WWF conference used that same slide. Only one of them referred to that first slide of human population. They talked about the consumption, the carbon dioxide increase, the marine fish capture, etc., etc. And I'm afraid, Mark, today you also ignored talking about that first slide. And it's sort of psychologically embedded in your brain that you can't talk about population. It's a taboo subject. Well, it really isn't. Get it out. It's okay. We can use the P word. You're amongst friends. So we can do it. Now, and to give WWF credit, Jonathan mentioned it too, the Living Planet report is an absolutely brilliant resource. Every 2 years it comes out, and it's a sort of comprehensive, critical benchmarking of the status of the world's wild species. And we heard, the latest one of last year said that in 2018, the latest Living Planet report, 60% of the world's vertebrate wildlife has been lost. Lost, a very interesting word. Lost between 1970 and 2014. But that pretty much confirmed what the 2016 Living Planet report had said. It just said 58% of 4,000 species that had been studied, been monitored over the past 60 years, had been lost. What is really interesting is that in that Living Planet report, the word population is used nearly 200 times in the 2018 report and in the 2016 report. On only 4 occasions is it used with reference to human beings. It's a glaring omission. That is the most dominant, numerous primate on Earth. Every single day, 250,000 extra human beings are added to the world population. That is more than the total population of the chimpanzees, of Jane Goodall's beloved wild chimpanzees, more than the entire population. So, we know that there is a correlation between human population growth and the extent of extinctions and the rate of extinctions. This graph is taken from an article in Science magazine in 2014, which estimated that extinctions were taking place hundreds to thousands of times faster than background levels, i.e. before human dominance, other than asteroid strikes or massive volcanic eruptions or ice ages, etc. So, welcome to the Anthropocene. Not a very nice welcome, really, but there you go. It's the age of humans with the 6th mass extinction underway. And Anna was asking me, can you talk about Bigfoot? Nobody really knows who he is or what he is. Bigfoot is our representation of the Anthropocene. He's an oversized human being. Well, he's oversized in terms of his feet. His feet are that heavy footprint on the earth. And he's rather controversially made out of a matrix of thousands of little steel baby blanks welded together. And he's standing on the earth and crushing biodiversity out of it. He has never offended anybody who has seen him in person. I've had families around him. I've had children talking about him. He has never offended it. It is not an offensive subject. It is about talking about the facts and the reality. And as we've learned from Greta Thunberg and many others, and the film that Phil showed us, children are quite capable of the reality when it's about their future and the security and stability of the earth they're going to be living on. So we know the Anthropocene is with us. And what was most interesting was that we used this to try and get our Bigfoot into the Natural History Museum. We used this report, which was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And it was extraordinary to see that phrase, biological annihilation, within a peer-reviewed, published report in a scientific journal. Gentlemen and ladies, it is serious. When scientists are using stronger language than campaigners, things are very, very serious indeed. The Natural History Museum declined our kind offer of Bigfoot, so I was really pleased to see that Extinction Rebellion held a die-in in the centre of the Natural History Museum last week. So our footprint, Bigfoot, our footprint on the earth is very heavy. Overall, on average, we use up more than 1.5 Earth's worth of resources each year, or at least some of us do. Many of us, as Winnie pointed out, in high-consuming countries are using far more of our fair share of the Earth's resources than others. If we all tried to live like Americans, we'd need 5 Earths. Clearly, that is impossible. And we also need to try and ensure that people in countries with much lower consumption have greater access and a fairer share of the Earth's resources. But that is going to be challenging as population grows. So when the Global Footprint Network, who provide these figures, first ran Earth Overshoot Day in 1970, Earth Overshoot Day fell on the 29th of December. We were just about within the sustainable use of the Earth's resources. Last year, it fell on the 1st of August, 150 days earlier. And the world population had gone up from 3.7 billion in 1970 to 7.7 billion last year. So an increase of 4 billion. So there is a correlation. But it's not just about consumption, because as there is an increase of people coming onto the planet, they need stuff, they need food. And this is from a report by the World Bank and the United Nations, which indicates a 56% food gap with a projected increase of population of 2.8 billion by 2050. And where's that food going to be grown? Well, it's got to be grown on land, as Phil and others have pointed out. So we are impacting more on the remnant habitat and land available to species other than our own. At the moment, only a quarter of the Earth is untouched, or just about untouched by humanity. That's set to fall to 10%. So the pressure is on. And consumption is increasing as well. We've talked about consumption. Yes, people need to have a better quality of life. At the moment, there are about 3.5 billion high-level consumers in the world. That's set to grow to 5 billion by 2050. Never mind the Americans, the Chinese middle class, the Indian middle class, the Nigerian middle class. They want more stuff. And why shouldn't they? But maybe they should want more stuff less than we have, and somehow enable us to get back into balance with this wonderful planet and its resources. This is the sort of final summary of the science. This is a statement from the World Scientist Warning, which came out in 2017, 25 years after their first warning at the time of the Earth Summit, where they basically said, the Earth is out of balance, consumption is running away, population is also out of control, you need to do something. Very little had happened. You see why Greta Thunberg gets so fed up. We were talking about this when I was not a child, but a lot younger, 25 years ago, and not enough has happened. The World Scientist Warning, 20,000 plus scientists from 184 countries saying we've got to do something. And they indicate population as a key driver of those problems. Surely that's enough science for anybody to start doing something about it and accepting that population is a number one factor that we must deal with. Thank you. Hope. Let's have some hope. The reason this is probably the most important slide I'm going to put up, because these are projections by the United Nations of the long-term human population by 2100, and it's based on a range of factors. And the reason there's a low, medium, and high is because the median, which is 11.2 billion by 2100, if they've got their sums right, that's what will happen. If they are out by a very small factor of half a child more per woman on average around the world, we will hit 16.6 billion. If they are out by, more optimistically, that they've overestimated, so there's half a child less per woman around the world, we will get to 7.3 or 7.4 billion. That's a 9.2 billion gap. So there's a huge opportunity to make positive choices to enable us to get to that lower level, which we may just be able to balance our pressure on the planet. And we can do it. We can do it. There are solutions, positive solutions, which people have talked about, particularly enabling education for girls and for boys, access to family planning and so forth. There was a fantastic study by Project Drawdown, which some of you may have heard of. They were looking at the top 100 solutions to climate change available now. They squidged it down to the top 10. At 6 and 7 were educating girls and family planning. When you combine those, and there's a synergy, they became number 1. They saved more carbon dioxide per year than all onshore and offshore wind combined. And not only do they do that, unlike a wind turbine, they give women and girls an opportunity to fulfill their life potential, to be active and entrepreneurial in their community. So it's a no-regrets win-win solution, and it delivers on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we work with organizations, this is a quote from Paul Hawken saying, why this is a no-regret solution. It's such a positive thing to do. Talking about population is not negative, it's positive. It's about doing good stuff, more good stuff. So we work with various organizations around the world to try and enable fertility rates to be reduced and enable family size to be smaller. But it has to be a positive effort. These are countries which have been really successful in reducing their fertility rate from about 7 to 8 down to maybe 2, 3, 4. A really good example is Bangladesh. In the 1970s, their fertility rate was 7 to 8 children per woman. They've got it down to 2.1, which is replacement level now. But it took 30 years of effort. And we haven't got 30 years to save the planet. So we've got to do more things like working with the likes of Wendo Azed from Dandelion Africa, supported by Chase Africa, working with boys and girls in Kenya to change the patriarchal society and to open up their opportunities. We're also working at the international level to try and get population in this thing called the Convention of Biological Diversity, which is meeting in Beijing in 2020, and Mark and WWF will be there. There is no reference to population in those targets as yet, so that's what we are focusing our efforts on. But look, this is not about pointing fingers at countries which have wonderful iconic species like leopards or lions or tigers or elephants. We in the UK have been described as one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. We've just got used to it. Our fields are green deserts. There's virtually nothing there but the crop. So we could easily have called this conference the last avocet, the last badger, the last curlew, the last dormouse in the house, because we are already well overshot. And finally, we've used this word biodiversity so much. What does it mean? Biological diversity, wildlife. Well, here's what it means. Here's a contrast. There's a biodiverse planet, Earth. There's an adverse planet, Mars. Earth has an average surface temperature of 14 degrees. Mars is 63. Earth has a breathable, life-supporting atmosphere and functioning ecosystem. Mars, atmosphere, 90% carbon dioxide. Life forms, well, if you're really pushing it, there might be something wriggly in that little lake they found, but I really doubt there's any meaningful life. So as NASA warns on its website, travelers of the future, beware, Mars is no place for the faint-hearted. Earth is our home, our mission. Indeed, our survival depends on altering our trajectory to live in harmony with the still extraordinary diversity of life it supports, as well as our own. Thank you.